Welcome to the Evolve Talent and HR Show. I'm Anna Morgan, your career BFF, known as the rescuer of dogs and careers, but now the creator of the Evolve Talent and HR experience. My career has been one big series of unexpected plot twists that now have landed me in the world of events for the recruitment and HR industry. Evolve was born from a desire to build heart centered spaces for leaders to show up boldly and learn together. This show is for the modern day employee, a people first leader, individual contributors, managers, executives, practitioners, entrepreneurs, and fractional leaders who care deeply about humans and are not afraid to do work differently. If you influence how people are hired, developed, led, and supported, you belong here. On the show, you're going to hear conversations with talent acquisition leaders, HR business partners, event organizers, sponsors, speakers, and attendees who are passionate about building human-centered, connected, and creative workplaces. So if you're ready for something a little bit different, community, fresh energy, and practical inspiration that you can use right away, you're in the right place. This is the Evolve Talent and HR Show. Let's dive in. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Anna Morgan, your career BFF and founder of the Evolve HR and TA experience. So today on the show, I'm sitting down with someone who spent their entire career rewriting how we hire with our words. Kat Kibben is a two-time author, founder of 3 Ears Media, and the person I think that leaders call when they want to be better at being more human in the age of AI. So I'm hoping this conversation today is a little bit permission slip, a little bit playbook with Anna and Kat. You never know. But Kat, I'm so excited that you're here because this is the intersection, I feel like, of where you sit, recruiting, writing, resilience, real life, and really the conversations that I think people and our organizations and our community need to have. So for anyone in the Evolve or Career BFF community who might not know of you from LinkedIn or a stage that you've stepped on, how do you introduce yourself these days?
Yeah, so my name is Kat Kibben. I run a company called 3 Ears Media, and it's named after two dogs with 4 ears. Story for another time. And I am a recruitment consultant and a writer. I think my dream in this world is that someday I'll say I am a speaker and a writer, and that's what I do. A lot, I'd say probably 80% of my time is spent doing the work, and the other 20% of my time is spent having conversations with smart people who are doing the work and writing about it. Right. And it allows this really beautiful lens of reflection that I know we can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again, but that really, like, we're kind of in that era where we have an opportunity to change things for the first time in my career, I know. And now I'm really excited to have a voice where I can empower that change just simply by having a lot of case studies in my brain after 15 years of working in this field, writing about it and talking to smart people.
Yes, yes. I'm not a writer, and I have such respect for people as talented as you and your newsletters, your blog, and a blog is still cool, by the way. Even
Thank you.
you mentioned the other day, like, I'm old, I still have a blog, but how cool to document that journey in addition to all the data points that you would have. So you hit on an important thing, like thinking about talent acquisition and HR teams that call you and hire you. Now, they're telling you they need help with X. What is X? And then what do you hear like underneath that in
Yeah,
a
I
way?
love that. I love that. So I think they come to me for a couple problems very consistently. The
Okay.
first thing they say is we're not consistently delivering. And often that's a factor of the fact, and you've seen this, right? You get into the
Because
team,
they keep laying off their recruitment teams.
that part. Well, and they also scale inefficiently. So what ends up happening is teams that grow really fast, especially your medium-sized business, what I see is that when the team grows beyond maybe 3 people and we get into the 5 to 10 range, we have a lot of inconsistency in skill development. I have 3 recruiters who are really, really good, super senior and advanced, but they have the exact same job title as 7 recruiters who have very little experience, struggle to advocate with hiring managers, and just don't have kind of the wear and tear of a recruiter who knows how to influence
Right.
instead of convince.
Can you say that one more time? Because that was a beautiful mic drop moment, and I wanna hear it again.
Yes, recruiters, the wear and tear of a recruiter shows up most when recruiters are allowed to influence instead of convince. They know their responsibility is influence. That's usually like that is my red flag of the junior recruiter is that they're trying to sell me on something. And I'm like, but no, that's not what consultants do. Consultants don't have to convince you this is a problem because you hired them because you already have the problem. And we
Exactly.
forget when we're in house, like, I don't have to convince you that you have a hiring issue or we wouldn't need recruiters,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So that's
Well,
kind of path one is the consistency issue. The second one is the one everyone expects, which is my job postings suck, please help. And what they really mean by that is my job post is not delivering a highly qualified pipeline. I am either getting a lot of unqualified people or I'm getting nothing. Both are problems that we can't just kind of like swim in.
Right, right, exactly. I love that you talk about you're teaching organizations and recruitment teams how to do job post, obviously, but you're also kind of dabbling in that world of AI and how to be more human. And this is something that has been really top of mind for me this year as I've been in this unexpected plot twist of my career and paying attention to the balance between AI and human. So for me, where I'm embracing AI and leveraging it, and I use it in a lot of different ways as a brainstorming partner, as a way to minimize administrative tasks, I am very conscientious about my IRL, my heart to heart connection, and those in person moments because personally, I see that acceleration of loneliness really expand when I don't have that balance. So I'd be curious how you're having conversations. Obviously, you're doing the job posting, you're coaching recruiters. How are you training leaders and organizations to be better at being human when, you know, we're drinking AI out of a fire hose?
Yeah. I really think this is a cultural shift that needs to happen inside of teams because we've had a good enough data culture for a really long time in the world of recruiting. And what I mean by good enough data culture is not, are we measuring time to fill? What I mean by a good enough data culture is the job post is good enough. Post it. The results were good enough. We got enough qualified candidates. We got enough people to interview. We got someone to say yes. And that good enough culture, right? It's going to have severe consequences on the transformation, and I'm air quoting for anyone who's not watching a video, right? The transformation of recruiting inside of a business. Because if our data is not quality, we cannot generate results. Generic data will get you generic results, just like it always has in recruiting, whether we had a machine making things faster or we had a person running every single step. And
Yes.
so that's
The
really the
age old
conversation.
challenge.
Yes, right. And making a cultural shift is not easy, but I think they need to understand that infrastructure. One of my favorite charts that I've really seen leaders start to digest is, and this is one of those slides I find myself adding to every presentation that talks about AI, is this idea that at the base is the job data. What makes this person qualified? What makes this person successful? And all of the other experiences that we can generate from that information require that information to be right. And
Mhm.
the consequences are not just on recruiting. I feel that, when you talk about human to human, the consequences are someone's career. If I create a learning pathway with AI based off of faulty upfront data, I am screwing up your career path now, not just a hire.
Wow.
It's bigger. It's bigger now. And
It's much bigger.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I know coming up in agency, boutique, corporate, the challenges with the technology and the data in, data out, it has been universal throughout. So, how do you see them fixing that now? And then, two, what are the levers or shifts and kind of those data points that matter today that kind of show that evolution of tracking those client or team results, if you will?
I think it starts with allowing yourself to imagine that the job post might not look the same way it always has, and that we really need to get to an evolutionary state. And what I mean by that is it's not just one job post, it's actually tracking the role from the most entry level role and seeing how it develops over time, both from a compensatory angle, but also from a skills place. And now,
Okay.
the second I say skills, what just happened? Everybody was like, skills based hiring. No, no. Okay. My issue with skills-based hiring is this, and many people have different definitions. So let me define my version of skills-based hiring and then tell you why it's problematic. So the current state of skills-based hiring is there's a keyword library. It is associated with a series of definitions that someone like me wrote. I know this because someone asked me to write one of them and I said no. And you go through a series of quizzes, highly validated or not, that's to be determined. But you go through a series of quizzes that assess your skills based off of a series of inputs that you add with very little guidance from the machine on what a good input is or what a bad input is. And then this makes a magical output that says you are qualified or not. And my problem with this is that words do not have universal meaning. Collaboration to you and collaboration for the tech role that you're hiring might have wildly different meanings. And we never established definition. We just established your understanding of what that word means and your ability to provide a data output. That does not make for a better hire on the other side. In my research, what I've found actually makes for a better outcome is four things that you must absolutely define for a role. The first one is
Okay.
autonomy. Do you do it by yourself or do you need someone else to watch over your shoulder? What level of autonomy does this role have? The next is aptitude. Obviously, the two go hand in hand. Aptitude is the tools you use and how you use those tools. The biggest mistake people make in this category is they make it very linear or they try to add years of experience. No, this is about scope and scale of the
Can we
role.
just pause there for a moment? Why do years of experience mean excellent at whatever it is that you do? And Can we just tell that story in a different way? Is how I would always coach job seekers. Sorry, can't ever take that
Yes.
coaching hat off.
No, we are 100% aligned on this because
Okay.
time is not equivalent of expertise. The way I teach that back to managers and recruiters is I say, okay, you and the person next to you had the exact same job title at two completely different companies for 3 years. Did you do the exact same thing and learn the exact same thing over those 3 years? And they absolutely 100% say no. There's no chance, right?
No
Then why
chance.
are we
Yeah.
using 3 years of experience as your baseline?
So with that, what's like the language change that you would use? And then don't forget about 3 and 4.
So the language you use is you know how to. Then you provide that language. You know how to build a database and manage a database with 10,000 entries. You feel comfortable. You have work experience where you learned how to. The biggest mistake people make with this one is they do not add scope and scale because hiring 10 people is a different job than hiring 100 people. You right? Hiring for this kind of job versus hiring high volume, low retention manufacturing in rural Kentucky are two different recruiting jobs, scope and scale. Okay. The last two are pretty obvious, but they also do not make the job posting very often. And it is peopling, meaning, do you lead people? Are you a manager? Who's on your team? And the next one is communication. Who do you communicate ideas to? I love that one because it allows us to level a role really easily. Because if you're presenting to the CEO, you're probably not the associate marketing manager unless you're at a company of five.
Right. Yeah.
And then when we start to map those four criteria across the lifespan of a role, associate, manager, director, it makes it really easy to level. It makes it really easy to communicate what you need to do to get promoted. And it becomes a tool that lives with someone throughout their entire career instead of something we posted for 30 days, deleted, and never looked at again.
Love, love, love. Autonomy, aptitude, bullying, and communication. Okay. I love communication. Who do you share those ideas with? I have to tell you, the one thing that's also going through my mind as a consultant now, but you go into organizations to help them solve X, typically probably their job descriptions. How much cleanup or due diligence and other things do you uncover in your onboarding or intake process with your clients?
Yeah.
Because I wonder if sometimes that just stops you in your tracks and you're like, well, we have a whole lot of other things that you might want to look at over here because, even if we have the most perfect job posting, there's still X happening in this part of the organization.
Yeah. In order to deliver consistent results with something that everyone does, it requires so much more than the job post. And I really do think people, because I'm a technical copywriter, right? They think I'm coming in and I'll say, I'll write 100 job postings. Here you go. And I have to tell you, there have been two projects in my career where I accepted a role where they told me just write the job postings. Don't do anything else. And both of those contracts I canceled, not even 30 days into it, because you're so right. This is not an output issue. This is a
Yeah.
process issue.
It's either process, ops,
Yes.
leadership, culture.
Yep. So the first thing we do is I audit every single template and tool. Let's click by click. What happens when you create a job post? What databases are referenceable? If you use Workday, the way you create a job post, again, air quoting, is you type in a number and it auto populates the job post you've already used. Well, we all know job
And
postings
it's
suck.
actually the job description for the associate, which is not a job posting, which was a conversation I had to have many, many times as a
Yes.
Workday operator back in the day.
Yes. Because a job description is a legal CYA, cover your butt. A job posting is a marketing version of the content to get the right person to apply. And even that, right? So mapping that process, that's usually what we find. And typically the problem is the template is not consistent or the hiring manager intake is not consistent, meaning we are not all getting the same data points. And the consequence of not all having the same data is that we're not creating the same output. And so we really start from a place of here's what's going well, here's what's not going well, here's a good system. Then we run a pilot in your hardest division, right? It will take on two at a time. And when we run it in the hardest division, what it does is it pressure tests our systems. Then we roll out, train, and work with teams. But I think that step about the pilot and pressure testing is where people are really surprised. Like, wait, a copywriter wants to run experiments? Yes, I love experiments because the answers are not one size fits all.
Absolutely. No, it's fascinating. I mean, and there's so many moving parts to coming in as a partner in that capacity that I love you have that kind of specific process to set you and your clients up for success. The other thought I was kind of going across my ticker is that all these executives, they think, well, we don't need Kat Kibben. We have AI and we have this great technology that, is just blowing up and, all the fear mongering articles out there in the last couple of days about all the white collar jobs going away and it's like almost dystopian. And, I'm like, let's have more in-person events and hug each other.
Just I gotta
There
say
was a question
something.
in there somewhere.
I gotta comment on those articles though. If you really look at these, if you really look at these pieces, I just want everyone to contextualize something that has been sticking in my brain. And this might get me in some fights, but I don't care. So the first thing I want to say is comparing AI to a pandemic or a disease is a illusionary comparison
I was wondering how that connection was made.
because we have a choice with AI. We do not have a choice with a viral disease that is communicative by people interacting with each other and viruses that we cannot see, okay? That is not the same as a tool that literally cannot exist if you don't create. If we all got off the internet right now, AI would die. It literally would just poof, disappear. It is such an illusion. And it's because the bros think fear feeds. Fear, it's that sales culture applied to a toxic technology. So we have a bunch of people who think they can scare us into making us buy. And I am not for it. And so every time you read one of those scare tactics, I want you to just wonder why the sourcer is telling you that you shouldn't post jobs anymore, that you should only source. And I want you to tell me why the guy who's selling technology is calling everyone else a Luddite and telling them that they don't know real uses of technology. And if you're not adopting technology, you'll be left behind. And tell me why the person who's selling a book about career coaching is all of a sudden telling you that everyone else isn't qualified to give you career advice. Okay?
Just a typical day on our LinkedIn streets, right?
And you have read all the same posts I have. You know whose buttons I'm pushing right now, and I don't even care because I'm so tired of consumption without questioning the motives of the seller. We live in a car sales world right now. Please be critical of the person who is giving you information.
And I want to pause there. We should come up with an analogy for a little bit younger generations too, because I feel like the car salesman or car salesperson is more Gen X and older. So, what story would we paint for our younger listeners?
You know that Instagram ad that makes you go, are they listening to me?
Yes. Okay.
That if someone is trying to convince you instead of presenting an idea with conviction, you should call bullshit on that idea. Conviction over convincing, please.
And, over my career, people have tapped me on the shoulder and said, Anna, you have a great personal brand. One of the things that you do well is that you get access through influence. And going back to what you said earlier, for me, the core golden thread of success was really focusing on that influence that allowed me to be a top performer in both in house and agency. And that's why I feel so passionate about hosting events where people can be in community, because with everything that's happening AI related, that we are able to really just like break down those barriers and remove the gatekeeping. And that's where people are safe enough to say, yeah, I'm experiencing that too, or I've felt that same way. And those to me are the accelerators of future innovation. And again, I love AI as a tool and the technology we use is amazing. But again, if everything poof went away, at least I'd have your phone number. I know that you're in Chicago and I could meet up with you when I'm in town. So, how are you working with organizations around that influence access, which is really ties into your book, I feel like, in regard your new book, into being more human, in the age of AI?
Yeah. Well, I think we need to understand what machines do best and what we do best.
My laundry. Can they just do my laundry? That would be and cook me some meals? That would be great.
Yes.
Just don't take all the
Right?
jobs.
How about you force me to load the washing machine correctly? Because it took until, I am not joking, the last 5 days for me to see an Instagram account where they explained that if there's no agitator in the middle of your washing machine, that everything should be put into a circle because it actually
You don't have an
can't.
agitator?
So I know, right? We're showing how old we are again, Anna. Look at us.
Yeah, I mean, we get excited about washers with agitators. Is
Yes,
it front load or top load?
that's it, right? And like, if they weren't trying to solve what they saw as easy problems, and what they're learning, I think what we're all learning right now is that humanity is not an easy problem. That people are
Yes,
not
like,
variables.
wow. Yeah, and nor are we line items on a spreadsheet, thanks,
Yes,
So,
yes.
you spend a lot of time talking about AI for recruiting, like, what are the leaders and teams afraid to say out loud right now in regards to AI? Or, "I'm too old to learn AI," or, "I feel like some people think AI is cheating in your job." And it's like, well, we had Google before and then encyclopedias.
Yeah. Well, Anthropic did a really interesting research study where they looked into how people use AI. But what I found most interesting from that wasn't about how they use it, it's about how they talk about it. And the majority of people said they use AI, but they actually aren't telling anyone else on their team.
Organizations should be hosting like how your afternoon, share how you're using AI in recruiting or merchandising or inventory or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I actually, funny enough, we were just talking about my experiments, right? A couple weeks ago on my blog, I actually wrote kind of a script for how you can invite experimentation into your team meetings. Because the reality is that no one's going to take the risk of saying, I'm using AI because they're scared they're going to lose their jobs. If you've worked in recruiting for any period of time, you know to be scary,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And so you have to make experimentation part of your team meetings. And kind of the high level is you dedicate 10 minutes to hot seats where people present things that they are doing and you assign the week. So this week's Anna, next week's Kat, the week after is Lauren, right? Whatever that looks like. And then you make space for sharing and you set the expectation that sharing is part of being part of a team. There's no
absolutely.
opportunity to hide and live in your own little vortex of AI.
Yeah. Well, and then it's that permission slip. When people see you sharing or utilizing in that way, the ripple effect of innovation can be massive, but you have to have that trust and leaders that are willing to, I guess, put those types of situations within their day to day learning. So, man, I
Well, and
love
I
that.
think I just want to add one more thing. I think
Yeah,
the experimentation, the ultimate consequence is resilience, right? And that's really in my head, and that's one of the topics I cover in my book. So, and it's about navigating uncertainty with confidence. And I think that's where we should be nurturing our teams right now because we can't promise them jobs, but we can give them the skills they need to survive and thrive no matter what happens.
absolutely. And I feel like utilizing those tools, one, it eliminates that uncertainty because they're like, hey, boss is using it. And then it gives them the opportunity to build their skills and expertise, which kind of ties into confidence. But my other thought was, can you really navigate uncertainty with confidence? And what does that look like? Because I play a lot in that resilience playground. You probably
Yeah.
see me around.
Yeah. So I wrote a whole book about it.
I have your other book that I've read a long time ago. I have not purchased this one, but I
Okay.
certainly will.
Well, you're putting the bounce back factor on your reading list. And I learned in a very unconventional way. So, for those of you who don't know about the book, I sold everything I owned and I moved into the back of a van. And this book is the story of living with a paralyzing fear of uncertainty. I grew up in a military family. There was a right way to do everything. A single mom, both my parents were active duty. And I believed when I got into the world of work that it would work just like the military. All I had to do was work hard and make sacrifices. I would get promoted. I would get my money. I would be taken care of. And I learned really quickly that's not how things work. I was laid off twice before I turned 30. And I bring up all of that because it set this paralyzing fear inside of me that whatever happened next was going to topple my life. And I took a risk most people don't. And I don't know why I did it. I had never been camping before I made this decision. There's a lot of faulty elements here, yes, but deeply I knew it was the next best step of my life. And what it did, I thought it was this voyage into autonomy. And what it really was an unpacking of every problem that was ever stopping me. And I took those stories, I took those experiences and brought them together with the laws of work. Things like you can't ask for help, you can't change direction, you can't quit, and really tried to give people a new lens on how those rules do not serve us. Because navigating uncertainty is actually really, really simple when you start to look at it as a life strategy, not something you
Yeah,
just do at work.
I love that. You said the life strategy in regards to it. It took me back to relationship building, influence, and access because you just gave me kind of a light bulb moment. So I'm just going to roll with it. When people ask me, like, how do I do that? Can you write it in a step by step process and sell it? The answer is really no, because it's oftentimes intuitive or a sense in a lot of ways. But those things are things that I've done inside and outside of work, which I feel have given me the autonomy and options and or career insurance I used to like to talk about, so that if or when I'm the line item on the spreadsheet, been laid off once, rehired many times by the same employer, then you have options, and you have a story, to tell and something to have a softer landing pad, if you will. Now, you wrote the book just released recently, but that was the entire journey of when you lived in the van and the kind of unfolding, if you will, of what you learned and how you apply that to the world of work. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's really a
Okay.
leader's guide. The subhead of the book is a leader's guide to liking yourself while leading people. Because I think that was the hardest part for me is that I felt like, and I'm sure you've seen, right? Like the bosses on TV, the perception of what a manager is, it feels like it's all hard decisions and rigor. And the reality that I learned really quickly when I got thrown into it at 28 and again when I started this business is like the reality is that if you don't like yourself, you can't actually be a good manager.
Yeah. I chose to be an IC most of my career. And maybe because I was in recruiting and I saw one too many people get promoted. and the impact of someone being in a leadership role without leadership skills, or maybe to your point, detested themselves for some reason. And so I always chose like I'm good with my commission, my structure, but I feel like leadership shows up whether you have that title or not, and how you enrich or impact people's lives and the results that you create in our space is what matters. There was a question in there. Kat, you're like giving me all these downloads and I'm like, man, I'm going to have to write a book after this conversation. And so I think like from seeing that, like when I was tapped on the shoulder, I'm like, thanks, I'm good. And as I've grown in my own career and now in the fourth season of my career, which sounds crazy to think about because I'm just getting started, I can see how that evolution of leadership has changed me, mostly from being an entrepreneur. I always tell people if you have some unhealed wounds or some stuff that you don't want to look at, go into entrepreneurship and that stuff will be like right in your face. And maybe more in the corporate world, we can get by without kind of doing that reflective, kind of inner healing work of sorts. Because if we're in collusion with ourselves, how are we going to be of service to the teams that we're in charge of? Right. And most people are oftentimes too scared to look in the mirror in that capacity. So I've seen a lot of leaders deal with pandemic burn, decision fatigue, obviously burnout. People are tired right now. So the message and the resources that you are providing is so needed right now. I was thinking about what was going on, or how are you seeing your clients implement some of your frameworks or leadership lessons from the book today?
Yeah, it's everyone who's changing, which is everyone right now,
Everyone, all the
right?
time. Yeah.
So on the recruiting teams, what I'm seeing is a more functional leadership, meaning that the leader functions in a way that is a model to the people on the team. They know to mirror those behaviors. And when the leader starts to change, everything starts to change, right? When the leader starts asking other people for help, you start to see the rest of the team deployed to ask for help. When the leader says we should quit doing that, that's not getting us the results we want. The team feels empowered to say we should quit. I think the one that I'm most proud of is that when I bring these topics to ERG groups, ERGs have had a really hard year.
For those that may not know what ERG means, can you
Yes.
share?
Yes, it's an employee resource group that is designed to help advance a particular group to create community and support around underserved communities inside of work. Often they have an ERG or a workforce group for the military, for women, for parents, for LGBT, for Black employees.
Hmm.
And so all these people have something in common. They're trying to create change inside of the organization that better supports all of these people and to create a better future for other people like them. And what I've been doing recently is taking the bounce back factor and using it as a framework for having hard conversations about creating change. And because we both know over the last year, because of federal changes here in the United States, these groups have been underfunded and really challenged. The federal government has said we will not have contracts with people who have ERGs, people who invest in diversity and equity. And so groups that have decided to maintain those groups, they are having hard conversations. They've had to rebrand, redesign their focus, create, I am not joking, keyword lists of words they are not allowed to use. And what I'm able to do is come inside even the most challenging framework and still empower them with the tools they need to create clarity and change around them. And that's like the coolest thing I've ever done because I am someone who exists in this world as a trans and non binary person who struggles sometimes because other people weren't willing to speak up. And so the idea that I can empower someone with the tool they need to say, hey, 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 no, we're not going to do that is
Hmm.
I feel a little emotional thinking about it. It's the work that I want to leave as my legacy in the world.
Beautiful. And what better way to capture it in a book? Like, do you have your kind of go to bounce back tools that you tend to kind of pull out of your toolkit more often than others?
Absolutely. I think the hardest one for me and the final lesson of the book is knowing when to quit.
Now I really have to read it.
The pregnant pause, right? But I always stayed too long in all of the places. I stayed too long in relationships that were not good for me. I stayed in jobs that were abusive, managers that were creating trauma, things I had to heal from.
Yeah.
And I read all the books on quitting. And one of the most powerful lessons that I still find myself going back to, I don't remember the name of the book, but they talked about roses and how if you see a rose bush growing in the wild, it's probably dying because roses cannot grow in the wild. They must be pruned in order to thrive. And I think there's a lesson here for all of us that our lives must be pruned in order for us to thrive, that our energy is not unlimited, that we must focus on kind of the most important things. And that feels a lot better than saying I quit. Just knowing that my energy is a limited source and that I want to apply it to the places where I think I can speak to the heart of people the most.
Speaking my language. And like, how does that tie in? I mean, that is your go to bounce back kind of why, your North Star. How does that tie into what you teach about your story is a strategy?
Yeah, I love that.
Does that come together?
It does. I think a lot of it is people just do too much, right? They wanna do everything. They
That's the
think
4 years, first 4 years of my business. By the way, congratulations on 8 years of
Thank you.
3 years media. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
But I think when it comes to quitting, I don't think people see it as a valuable aspect of entrepreneurship or a valuable skill in an employee. And here's why it matters. And I is because I do not need people banging their head against the wall to do the thing I told them to do. I need people with the critical judgment who tell me that's not worth doing. A machine will do what I tell it to do no matter what. This is again, we're going kind of full circle, right? This is a humanity versus machine moment. And it's one of those skills the machine will never tell you this isn't worth doing.
I was thinking about that last article where, it was giving feedback and taking you on this, being somewhat judgmental. You know, it is, it's all coming full circle back to the humanity piece and it's complex. It is, I feel like we live in this just instant gratification world, whether we're employees or entrepreneurs a lot of the time, and we just want that quick fix. And sadly, as your van journey taught you, that it is time and reflection and willingness to look at the messy, ugly parts of ourselves, of what we're building, the organizations we represent, all of that. And that is a direct connection to humanity. And how can we be better humans in this world of AI?
Yeah. And on that next level, it's like in that world of AI, failure cannot hold that much power over us, where it determines our actions, where it decides what we do. And that's how people have associated quitting for so long as failure. Do not let failure have that kind of power over your life.
Well, and they also say like we're corporate dropouts, right? Or I feel like when you make the conscious choice to exit traditional work, and I really think traditional work is transforming a bit now too, that we might see in 10 plus years that we're all fractional and we have three part time jobs. I always think about what it's going to be like for my mini me who's 17. It's not too far off, but it could look very, very different. I get on these tangents and I have a question and I try to set it up and then I get to the end and I'm like, what was the silly question? Gosh darn it. Maybe you can remember. Quitting. Oh, quitting. So sorry, sleep deprived. Quitting. When I made that decision, it was like, I had to deal with shame and guilt and why was I different? And I've always been different in school and whatnot. And now here again, I'm making this very scary choice. And the skills I developed during my entrepreneurship period, organizations would have to pay me 10x more for the skills I built through failure and just figuring it out. It allowed me to walk into organizations as fractional and a consultant with so much more confidence and influence because I knew that I had done the work, not only all being the photographer, the marketer, the accountant, all the things, but also having to do the tougher work because I remember, even this year, my family was in a bit of crisis and I had time to be building Evolve slow and steady. And I allowed myself to kind of get sucked in to the drama. And then I was like so overwhelmed. The only thing I could think of was if I just took care of the home, then I was doing something. But I could have definitely built a much more stronger foundation going into my event. But I had to get honest with myself about some of those patterns and the why behind it. And if you don't have a history of resilience and have had to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, sometimes you may lack the awareness to note those things or those patterns. And yeah, so I love that we're changing the narrative around quitting. Or if you do decide to go back to corporate, for those listening that have hung their entrepreneurial shingle and then realize that it's not for them, it's okay. And there are resources like you or me and a community of people that can help you write that story. And I think that ties back into your story is your strategy, whether you're leading or you're a job seeker, right?
Absolutely. I find that so many job seekers really struggle to understand how the big stories, those big quits, the big things that felt like failure to them are actually launching pads. When
Yes.
I think back on my life, often when I'm telling the story of kind of how I ended up at 3 Years Media, I find myself very anchored to some of the worst moments of my life because I don't think I would understand how important a job posting is had I never been laid off 2 days before I bought a house. And there was a fire under my ass to get a job, and I read hundreds of job postings every single day. I know what it's like to sit on the other side of a job post, type in a word, and pray. That is what anchors me, not compliance, legal liability, and consistent job postings. Yes, those help. But my anchor is in my truth. And that happened because I fell down, not because I always won. And when I reflect back to those job seekers, like, hey, I hear this coming up. often that fear, that doubt about themselves is actually propellant when we re-look at it, when we take that 10,000-foot view. And sometimes they need somebody like us to be like, no, 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 this is gas, not fire, man.
Exactly, exactly. My gosh, my heart is so full and a little bit of caffeine as well. I was reflecting back to what you said around, being able to evolve and transform and not be afraid to innovate and challenge the status quo and your North Star and your why, kind of where you've been, what you've done, and kind of where you're looking to go and what that legacy is going to look like is absolutely commendable. And I think that's also something that has made you a very in demand speaker. And I've read a little bit about you wanting to be, a keynote speaker, and you are. How does that come so naturally? And what were some of the lessons or tipping points that have gotten you to where you are today? Because it's people like you that make it look so easy. And then there are people that get on stage and they're like, like me.
Well, so what everyone should know is it doesn't come easily to me. I have been speaking since 2010 pretty consistently. And most of the time that I spend speaking is rehearsing, right? Studying, really coming over prepared because that's the only way that I can deliver confidently and make it look easy is because I am prepared past my threshold of nervousness. I can be nervous, but I know I have studied. I mean, whenever I have a presentation, most folks don't know this. The morning I wake up reciting my presentation. It is part of my dreams.
Well, I did a disrupt HR talk and my rehearsing, same thing. I would be like sleeping. I think I'm sleeping, but I'm actually saying my talk in my
Yeah.
sleep.
I'm waking up saying, "Hi, my name is Katrina Kibben. I'm the founder and CEO of 3 Years Media, and today I'm here to teach you." I mean, the day of, that's where I'm at. And now I have such a system for rehearsing and practicing. So if anybody wants to be a speaker, I'll share. So the very first thing I do when I'm doing a presentation is I kind of come up with the learning points. So I write the session overview first, just to get a vision on where we're going and what I want to teach people. And then I work backwards. I always have 3 sections, well, 4 technically. So I kind of know what my storytelling style is. I start with a story that's universal, that helps anyone understand why it's a problem. The second thing I do is I provide a large data set that helps kind of tell the story behind that problem so that you can see how vast it is. And it's kind of that moment between me and the audience where they go, oh, you know what you're talking about, right?
They're legit. We get it. Yeah.
And so this last section is where I'll teach you how to do the fix. And that's where I think a lot of people get messed up is that they think that their whole job is to convince you that they're smart instead of actually giving you something that you can go and do because they think that they won't get work if they teach other people how to do what they do. And that's not the case. And I say, as someone who has run a business for 8 years, so I figured something out, right? And the very last section is a gift. It's a free something, it's an action, it's some way to kind of bring them back into my website and build that relationship because I am trying to sell you something. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I don't do work or that this is all for
Like,
fun.
I want you to think of me when you have this or need that.
Exactly. And what you just said, I want you to think of me when you think of this problem. That should be the ultimate goal for every single entrepreneur listening to this, whether you're in HR tech, you're in recruiting, or you are eyeing the door from corporate out into doing your own thing. The number one thing you can do that will serve you is when they think of me, they think of this. And my career, I got really lucky. I got to fail a lot at my speaking early on when I was at Recruiting Daily.
Okay.
And they would, in corporate, they would send me to the speaking gig. They loved having me out there, right? And now I get to have a more precise approach where I get to really think about where's a good place for me. How do I make the most of this moment? Who's in the audience and all those other dynamics. But a lot of it is just eating this shit sandwich of applying to and getting rejected 100 times because I get probably 5 rejections for every acceptance.
Really? Even now?
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's important to talk about. Yeah. But for people listening, I created my first conference out of a little bit of rejection and celebration of my 50th birthday. But I never actually heard another person in my space talk about the number of times they've been rejected. My next question was like, how many conferences do you think you've been to over your whole recruiting career, approximately?
So my goal every year, most people don't know this either, is my goal every year is to have one speaking engagement every week. I love to be a speaker. I love to be a teacher. And to me, it's practicing my art. In the same way, I write every single day. I write something. Do I publish everything? No. Do I write every day? Absolutely. It's a muscle, just like my body, just
Do
like
you
my brain.
always type or do you handwrite?
If I'm writing about recruiting or kind of like that flow writing, I actually type because I can type faster than I write. But I write with my hand first. So my routine in the morning is I go to the gym and I have 1 cup of coffee. And while I have that cup of coffee, I read something someone else wrote and I write, even if it's
Do
4
you
sentences.
oftentimes write back to the what you read?
It depends. Right now, I'm reading 2
Kind of like
books.
the letter I wrote to my boss when they laid me off, but I never sent it.
Kind of, right? A lot of it for me is like those reactions to the LinkedIn post, my angry response that maybe I don't want to publish, but I got to get off of my chest or I'll never go back on LinkedIn. But to answer your actual question, I have been to hundreds of conferences. And if anyone ever wants to know, like, is this worth going to? You can always send me a private message and I probably have some thoughts for you.
So behind the scenes, I am new in the space now, going from recruiter to now an event host for the talent and HR industry. What have you learned about events from that perspective of an experienced keynote speaker?
I I
Or what do
think
you wish organizers understood more?
I think there's 2 pieces. The first thing that I really wish organizers understood is that the administrative details that are so obvious to you are not obvious to speakers. I have literally gotten an email that was like, "Go to D440." And I'm like, "Where is D440? What is that? Where am I going?" And it ends up being like, I'm wandering through this like a Where's Waldo game, like, just trying to find Waldo, just trying to find Waldo, you know?
And it's like, what do you want me to do?
Exactly. Well, and it's all the administrative. How far is this event venue from the airport? I remember I did an event at the Gaylord Dallas, but nobody tells you the Gaylord Dallas is an hour and 40 minutes from the closest airport. Or the year where I went to Houston and no one told me there are 2 major airports in Houston.
Airport myself, so you're not alone.
Went to the wrong airport at 4:40 in the morning, okay? On my birthday. No joke. Actually, a blessing in disguise that it was my birthday because when I had to tell the police officer to navigate me to my gate at the next place, he did it because it was my birthday and I wanted to go home.
Way
Those
to use
kinds
the
of
birthday
details.
card. Right time,
You know it. You
right
know it.
place.
Okay. And alternatively, as far as content, I think you need a really good balance of names you know and topics you want.
Names you
Because,
know and topics you want.
and this is something
What
that's
if you
reflected back.
want no names that nobody knows and off the wall topics?
Yeah.
Let's go.
So what I find is that there are 2 reasons why people attend conferences because they have a lot of choices. They decide to go because they really want to see one of the speakers. So, like, I got a message yesterday from a friend being like, "Oh my God, you're speaking at Milwaukee Sherm." I just asked my manager to pay for my ticket because they saw me and they know me and they want to see me. Alternatively, the second category of people who aren't living in this world, who don't have relationships with people, say, "What do I want to learn?" They scan the agenda, and if they see a topic that's relevant to them, they would pursue going to that conference. So, example, I'm seeing a lot of people say, "Well, I want to go to a conference with creators." And I'm always laughing because I'm like, creators don't speak at conferences. Creators join masterminds because they know that it's not a one creating, creators create. That
Yes.
means that they have an evolving conscience. And I think that's kind of the gap and why people get dissatisfied with conferences is they go with an expectation of something that a conference does not serve. So if you're looking for like deep connection with 4 other people in which we can connect every week for the next, join a mastermind, don't go to a freaking conference, right? If you want to learn in community and hear other people's questions and be inspired and be surrounded by great people, go to a conference. If you want to be connected, you're going to go to one of Anna's conferences because, and I've reflected this back to you myself, and I'll say it on this podcast too, is I think you're one of the best connectors in our industry. You effortlessly go out of your way to help people. And I'm not just
It
saying that
brings
because
me
I'm looking
joy.
at you. I know it does because the very first time we ever met, the very first thing you did was introduce me to the 5 other people around, even though like we know each other peripherally, you go out of your way to connect others. And I just want to reflect that back to you and everyone listening to this that you are one of the great connectors.
Thank you. I received that and I really truly enjoy doing that. Kind of going back to how do I unlock that? It's that neurospicy, rabbit, beautiful brain that I have that can make those unlikely threads of connection, which end up like doing really cool shit together. And a lot of times it's because I bring in a little different, a little bit unique, a little bit outside of the normal kind of funnel I feel like we have in this space. It keeps people on their toes a little bit.
And I think you know something that it took me a really long time to internalize, which is networking is just caring about others in disguise. When you're doing it right, at the core of it is deep consideration and care for the other person. And I felt that from you.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's the experience that I try to create in whether it's a dinner or a workshop or the next Evolve in-person event is really thinking about all attendees, all speakers, and really what's possible when they're in containers where there can be some depth, essentially. So for a speaker, you said the administrative details don't matter as much. I'm hearing keep the friction low and you can guarantee that I will step on stage and make you proud is kind of what I'm hearing, right?
Absolutely. Like, it's like that. You don't have to jump so many barriers to just show up and do your job.
Right, right. But also put yourself in the shoes of the speaker from logistics, preferences, experiences. Because it is hard to keep people happy and be inclusive and provide the right tools for everyone from a speaker standpoint. So thank you for that. And then I obviously think about the attendees. You and I have been at a lot of conferences, and I'm building what I wish existed when I was coming up in recruiting. to be of service. And also, it encompasses the best of all of my expertise from coaching, recruiting, talent acquisition. When I host an in person container, whether it's 15 people or 200, I can serve in a higher and more meaningful capacity, I would say. But for attendees, what are you seeing, in the last year or now that you would like to see conferences or events prioritize or focus on a little bit more in our space?
I tried to find the most business correct way of saying what I want to say. I would really like the conferences in our industry to admit that they are not for everyone.
And be okay with repelling those that they're not for.
You nailed it. If I go to one more conference where the keynote is about the future of work and it's an analyst presenting their research, which remember that whole who benefits from this information? Oh, surprise, the HR technologist is telling us we all need technology and the sourcer's telling us we should also be sourcing. And of course, the analyst is telling us that we should be reading their stupid little report and making all of our decisions based off of that. Stop allowing the keynote to be hypothetical. I think that's step one. The keynote doesn't need to be hypothetical about the future of work, and it most certainly should not be delivered by someone who has a team of 500 people developing resources, okay? I also strongly feel that, again, you need to focus on the education pipeline that you are trying to create. I want to help blank learn blank by doing blank, okay? That goes back to the story brand, and that's not my archetype here, okay? But I help blank do blank by blanking. I think broadly what I'm seeing right now is two things that lower the quality of events significantly. And the number one is they allow sponsors to pick every single speaker, which I will not attend a conference after I find out that that's one of the conditions. And that's a profitability element. The irony here is that the event that I'm speaking of doesn't pay the speakers, but will allow the sponsors to pay for the session and pay the speaker, but they hold no accountability in that. And alternatively, it's just like the sessions are all over the place. Is this for an entry level person? Is this for a mid level person? Is this for a senior person? Like just pick a group. Our industry suffers because there is no education pipeline. You and I landed here, completely different paths, which means
Yes.
we know different things.
Yeah, regardless of if we have both been a full cycle recruiter for 10 plus years, vastly different, kind of the callback to our earlier note. But gosh, I have so many questions. I might have to have another conversation on the side around just conferences because it is tricky. While I do a good job of connecting the dots of the speakers, I had 30 speakers this year across 4 ballrooms, which was wild, but it gave me a chance to pass the mic to new voices, which creating smaller, safer places because somebody passed the mic to me at one point and I have more fun doing that than actually holding the mic myself. And the 30 speakers, 4 different ballrooms, entry level, mid level track, or executive. So that was an area I was like, okay, I'm going to have an executive track next year. And it wasn't until I saw it all in action, then I was like, oh, I think I will make that adjustment moving forward. So that for me is a nice little humble failure of a great lesson that will help solve one of the priorities that you're focusing on, with regards to events. Speaking, being paid to speak, depending on the size, like I always think if you have 150 people, what should be the respectable speaker fee for that event? And can we do it by years in existence? Because, I've been so lucky to have a lot of people who just have shown up for me. One was my birthday, like, please come be a speaker, be my friend. And then the others just believed in what I was building and wanted to be a part of it. But that's a tricky spot in this space as someone who wants to host more of these containers. I never want to offend, but I want to be competitive and respectful more than anything. So I'd love any thoughts you have on that.
Yeah, I always look at it from perspective of the value exchange, right? So if you're hosting a conference at a Las Vegas hotel that I know you booked a full year in advance and you have 45 sponsors, I have a completely different ask of you than a 150 person conference in Atlanta where we're bringing together mostly like friends.
Yeah, 10 people, 10 sponsors.
And so my perspective, how I have the conversation, I guess I would say broadly, every speaker should have a minimum. And I think a minimum is $500. Because in reality, right, this person is losing a day. Yes, we're giving them opportunity. We're doing all these things, but you are asking for expertise in exchange for you being able to make money in theory. If we're below 500, I think we're just not having a mutual exchange. I think 500 is probably a little low, but let's stick there. And then from there, so I am an experienced speaker, so my minimum is a little higher than that. And that's okay, right? Because most of the time, if someone is talking to me about speaking, especially the paid element, they are asking me to be the keynote. And I expect more than $500 to be the keynote when a ticket sells for $400, right? And
That's
so
another topic.
So how I negotiate this conversation from my side, so I guess this is good for everyone, is knowing this tactic is the first thing I always ask is, do you have a budget in mind? Because I actually don't care what the bottom line number is. All I ask, and anybody who's asked me to speak knows this, is that all of us be paid equitably. I am not okay with Oprah getting $2 million while the rest of us get $400 each. Right. I am okay with there being three keynote speakers. You have a budget of $6,000 and each of us are getting $2,000. Okay, right? I'm 100% okay with that, but I will not be okay in a scenario where one gets 7 and the other gets 1,500 each. You get where I'm going with this?
100%.
I guess my whole drive is, yeah, I got a number. Yeah, I would love to make whatever, but I love speaking most. And so I'm willing to negotiate. I'm going to set a minimum and I'm going to ask that we all be paid equitably. And so my ask of event organizers is you should have a minimum in mind too. And you should be paying everyone equitably and tracking that as well. And if you can't provide that compensation equitably across the board, don't provide any.
Yeah, that's smart. Lots to think of as I move into bigger and bolder types of events. And some of the stuff I wouldn't learn without going through it or now knowing more of the right questions to ask in service of, again, attracting the right people to the stage and being equitable and respectful. Again, most importantly, the ticket price is all over the board in our space from $88 to 2000. That has been a hard kind of pricing area to navigate as someone who just loves to gather people. Still learning there. I don't know if you have anything to offer from that standpoint, but I think the bigger question that ties into that number is why aren't organizations prioritizing continuing education for all levels of their employees on a more consistent basis? Like, where did it all fall through the cracks that I never knew these types of conferences happened until 2021? I mean, was I living under a rock?
That's another one of those toxic rules, right? One of those rules that I had to unpack in my book is because I think we go to work and they hire us because they say we're the expert. And so the idea that we would need additional training in order to be the in-house expert is like,
We would absolutely need training. Like pilots need additional training. There's new software
but you and I both
updates.
know there's this
Yeah,
expectation that we're just going to do it, that we're going to do the thing and we're going to take the risk and sacrifice whatever if we really want it. And you've heard all of those phrases used about the job search, and they sure as hell apply to your career growth too. That's why everyone says you got to look out for you because no one is looking out for your career like you are.
100%. And why didn't I see statements like that on LinkedIn early career? Because when I met Matt Charney, I was like, I am the recruiter I am today because you're the only like resource I could find at the time to be staying relevant and up to date and having conversations about recruiting and how to do it better, differently, or in a more human centered way. And then I got the conference bug and now I haven't been able to stop. So, I just think in person, IRL, like the human to human component, I really encourage anyone listening for the health of their career and themselves, like finding that balance between the two. Really, I urge it to be a part of how you prioritize your life, right?
Yeah,
Kind of going back to the very beginning of our call, you talked about what you wrote in your most recent book as those life skills that apply to work and how, they're all interwoven, right?
exactly. Exactly. And really, too, remember that if you are fearing disruption in your job, in your industry, the number one thing that you need to gain stability is connection.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when I think about kind of what I'm excited about building, I mean, the more automated work becomes, and hopefully the robots will be doing our dishes and our laundry versus the other things, but we can use tech to write the job. It can summarize the meeting, which is awesome. But I don't feel like, AI or bots, they aren't the person that's going to host an intimate dinner. They aren't going to be those folks that can pull back the curtain and say, man, I have felt the same way too. And that is leaning into that humanity piece again, because if everything goes sideways, it's going to be who we know and who we're connected with that I feel will be a lifeline that is a lifeline today and in the future.
Yeah. If you're feeling burnt out, don't do more, connect more.
Do not do more. Well, I hang out the most on LinkedIn. I play around on TikTok and Instagram a little bit. For our listeners who have kept up with our shiny object squirrely conversation today, where would you like them? And they're like, I love Cat. I want more Cat. I need to hire 3 Ears Media to come and be a partner with my organization. How do you want them to get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on all your favorite platforms, been a marketer and been in this space for a long time. So I would say if you spell my name right, you will find me. If you spell my name wrong, you'll find a priest for the US House of Representatives, and you will know that you were in the wrong place because we have a very different haircut if you're watching this video. And I would also say that you should subscribe to my blogs. Every single week, I write two things for you. On Tuesdays, I give you advice about recruiting, and it follows a very similar format to the way I speak. You'll always get a template or tool every single week when you read my stuff. And on Fridays, what you'll get from me is a perspective on life. And how I think of it is it's kind of the accidental beautiful things. And I always want to be an anchor of joy and hope as much as it's a reflection and just try to have a little heart in this game. Because, like you said, it's not just about hiring, it's about being a human.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love it. And I catch your published writings on Tuesdays and Fridays myself. One thing that we didn't cover is your gluten free bread baking skills, because I can't end an episode and not talk about carbohydrates and being gluten free. Just kidding. Tell me more because I'm gluten free and I want some good bread.
Oh, I got you. I am a nerd, and I really love picking up a hobby and just like learning all the things. And so I'm currently taking a very scientific approach to learning how to recreate everything I love in gluten free. And I have a garlic knot recipe for you that's going to change your life. They are so good.
I will be up for the challenge. You send me the recipe and we can go toe to toe with our creations on Instagram, if you will. So, Kat, you are such a bright light in this space. And I'm just grateful that I've had more time to get to know you today. And I hope that I get to see you out on the conference circuit this year. Anywhere you want to share that you're going to be showing up, the rest of the season so people can say, I want to be in that conference because Kat's going to be there.
100%. So my next big one is Alaska Sherm. So if anyone wants a trip to Alaska and you get your company to pay for it, I'll see you in Anchorage in April. And I will also be in the tri-state area at the end of April, as well as in Louisiana, the week of April 20th. So if you're attending any of the state SHRM conferences that week, I will be at both of them.
All right. Well, if you're not coming to Atlanta sometime, hopefully you'll come and join us for Evolve 2027, which I'm done with January. We are not doing Evolve in Atlanta in January anymore. But this has been the Evolve Talent and HR show with my awesome guest, Kat. Thank you for being here. And I just want to encourage everyone to be bold, be brave, and keep evolving. We'll see you soon. Hey, thank you so much for hanging out with us today on the Evolve Talent and HR show. I'm Anna Morgan, your career BFF, and the intention with Evolve is simple: create brave, fun, and high trust spaces where people can connect, learn, and remember that they're not alone in this work. If this episode gave you a new idea, a sense of relief, or a little spark to keep you going, that means we're doing our job. If you are a talent acquisition or HR leader, an event organizer, or an HR or TA vendor, and you want to collaborate, I would love to hear from you and meet with you. You can always book an Evolve partnership call to explore partnership, custom events, regional dinners, virtual experiences, and fringe events that match your goals. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, keep showing up boldly, keep caring about people, and keep evolving. I'm always cheering you on.